Kristin Shaw with Airport Improvement Magazine, and I'm here with David Robichaud from LARUE. How are you, David?
Actually, really good. We're looking at a busy season, believe it or not, and the thermometer is dropping as we are. We've been in a heat spell too, but it's getting in the Celsius in the single digits overnight now.
Wow, I'm in Texas, and there's not a whole lot of change yet.
Well, I was talking with a customer in California a few minutes ago, and believe me, when I told him it was in the 50s last night, he just said, "Oh gosh, we're dreaming about that."
Glorious. No, I know it. So, you're in Quebec City, right?
Yes, that's where our plant is. That's where our manufacturing facility is. I travel, or where my head hits the pillow is where my office is usually for the day. I'm a road warrior from long back.
Yeah, I hear you. So you get to see a lot of places, but where you're based, definitely quite a bit of snow. So you have a lot of experience with snow and what you do. So actually, what leads me to probably we should start with explain to our viewers, who is LARUE and what do you do?
Well, LARUE is a family-owned corporation that specializes in the design, manufacture of snow fighting equipment, specifically snowblowers and runway sweepers. That's all we do. That's why they call us the snowblower people. We do snow. And Quebec City, where we're from, of course, is a Nordic humid climate, which is a little bit north the 45th parallel. It's actually a little bit north of Montreal, so it gets the big weather patterns. It's a place that can get 8 to 10 feet of snow in a year.
You're closer to the Arctic than the equator.
Well, actually, we are, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that's where the 45th parallel comes into mind.
Right. So on your website, I noticed it says that you have the best snowblowers on the market. What makes yours the best?
Well, we actually give ourselves a mission statement to produce not just a snowblower, but try to produce a snowblower that is the easiest to use, the safest, that uses modern technology, that we can integrate the modern technology to make it easier for the operators and the people that are using the equipment, but also the people that are maintaining and servicing these equipment. Because most of these acquisitions are long-term. It's not something that you buy every year. They want to get the best quality. So we take an attitude of what we do, we try to do as best as possible, but we also try to source the most commonly used industrial components to make it as easy as possible for the customers to service their machines over the lifespan. Some of these pieces of equipment stay in service for over 20 years.
Wow, that's great reliability.
That's the idea.
And you talked a little bit about technology. What kind of technological advancements or design advancements have come in the last few years, or that are on the that have really helped make snow blowing and snow removal more effective?
Well, for sure, in the last few years, new engine technology has been a key. We actually took a proactive approach before the new emission standards were mandated. We actually started working with engines and delivering machines even 2 years before the mandate was in force. Our objective was to not give any interim tier emission engines to our customers, only tier final, which means that they, for support from the engine manufacturers, are in a much better position. But we are actually delivering machines with stage 5 emission standards now, which even exceed the existing emission standards, but also give the customer a less intrusive engine management system. With diesel engines today, as an example, diesel exhaust fluid is used to help drop what diesel engines produce is soot versus a gasoline engine's carbon monoxide, for example. And what we do is we treat that exhaust with a urea product, which is called DEF, and it turns that DEF into ammonia as it's burned off at very high temperatures. So we integrate that technology, but we also have gone the route of multiplexing, maybe not 100% multiplexing, which means that there is a ECM or a computer module that controls the engine, for example. There will be a computer module that controls the transmission, but there will also be a computer module that controls the implement, whether it's a sweeper or a snowblower. And we've made it so that these systems are very easy to use. We actually take a human engineering approach, and what that means is that we try to make the ergonomics for the operators so that they actually have non-repetitive movements as much as possible, but also integrate what is a normal function for them, but also give them accessibility to the features and functions of the machine at a touch of a hand. Safety is a big part of our design factors.
Seems like it'd be fun to drive a snowblower. I mean,
It is. It is. It is. Operating a snowblower with 1,1400 horsepower or more is easier than driving a car in some circumstances because you're in a secure area. The machine might weigh more than 40,000 pounds, but it'll accelerate just as fast as your car will, but you're moving thousands and thousands of tons of product at the same time. So you're blowing snow at 20, sometimes 25 miles per hour. In cases, sometimes a little bit faster, but realistically speaking, under 25 miles an hour is really where most snow removal is done.
You're not measuring 0 to 60 like sports cars. You're measuring 0 to 20.
Well, I've taken a snowblower out on a runway where firemen are also operators, and they drive what's referred to as crash trucks. And they got into the snowblower, and I said, put the hammer down. And they looked at me and said, this thing accelerates faster than my crash truck. Yes, it does. It's designed to accelerate fairly quickly, but it also it gives a visibility, a quietness, which is very important today. To meet OSHA standards and SAE standards for operators, we have to lower the sound level as much as possible. We want to keep it under 89 dBA, and if much possible, even under 80 dBA or decibels. And in most cases in the cab for the operator, their sound level is at 77 dBA. So there's no need to wear any ear protection whatsoever. That is a big deal in today's day and age. Most people of my age that work in this business have some hearing loss because they've been operating machines that are extremely loud. And fortunately today, with the technology and with design, we've actually been able to bring that sound level down to make it comfortable. We can have a conversation like we're doing now while we're operating one of these big pieces of equipment without raising our voices in any way, which is really awesome.
That's impressive. Is that more due to sound dampening and that types of design?
Sound dampening, using the proper materials, using steel versus fiberglass or plastic or things of the like, using very thick glass, using the right type of glass, but also insulating the cab from the engine compartment to the point where there actually is a barrier between both. This also improves the dampening effect, but also having the right materials. It's amazing. I mean, these machines are delivered with AM, FM, MP3 players now, and of course they have their two-way radios. They can actually hear their two-way radios when they're running them, which is a big plus.
Yeah, I'm having a vision of your snowplow drivers having some beautiful symphony music in the background as they're hauling all the snow away.
Well, it's mostly rock and roll when they're doing this stuff, when they're operating. But yeah, some of them bring their tunes along. They'll bring their little iPods and they'll plug them into the radios and away they go. They should not wear earphones. That's not considered safe. It's like anywhere else. They don't use their radios, but they have two ways, which is a momentary thing that they use. The same regulations apply even to operating on a closed area like an airport. Safety, safety, safety.
What do you think airports forget sometimes about?
This time of year is delivery schedules and delivery times. Fiscal budgets, for example, a lot of airports, their fiscal budgets will be March or February or March or April. And with this time of year or in November or December to order a piece of equipment to have it by or before the end of their fiscal year is next to non-possible. Sometimes it is, but it's really something to keep in mind. Delivery times, for example, on engines from the engine manufacturers, which are the major manufacturers in the U.S., like Caterpillar and Cummins, is 100 plus days just to get the engines. Other components we order a year in advance, but we order axles, we order 20, 30 axles or whatever the order at a time. So those components that take longer, they ordered in quantities. So delivery schedules is a big key. But right now, directly is planning for the season to make sure the machine is ready to go, to make sure all the preventive maintenance is done, all the inspections are done, to take the machine out of storage, take it out and do its inspection, put it out and run the machines. Very important.
Do most airports have a plan, a very detailed plan? Because that leads into my next question. You answered part of it, but how can airports get ahead and anticipate for this season? Most
airports today have a operations manager. They will have, which looks after the planification parts of what needs to be done when. But also they have not just mechanics, some of them actually have service managers that actually look over the fleet. So they could look after the fire trucks, they could be looking after the crash vehicles, the service vehicles on the runways. And they use actually software today that'll give them when and what has to be done. Any type of repair, any time a piece of equipment is touched, it's logged in, and it gives them exactly when the next service needs to be done, the next inspection has to be done. All of these machines have a walk-around procedure that has to be done even before the operator gets in the machine on a daily basis. It takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending upon the piece of equipment, but they have to do a complete inspection, a visual inspection of the machine before they go out and put it into service every single day. But then they have a weekly check, a monthly check, an hourly check based on 20 hours, 50 hours, 100 hours. So it's quite extensive, but it's all well documented, so it becomes what we refer to as standard operating procedure. And we really have to maintain these SOPs or standard operating procedures, not just for maintenance, but for safety's sake. It's just, these machines are humongous, they're big, they will always win. So we have to make sure we follow our safety, go from there.
Definitely. Do airports typically buy the equipment outright, or do they lease or rent? Is there a range of things like buying a car?
The vast majority of airports are purchasing and running on capital budgets. For airports that are supported by the FAA, for example, and Transport Canada in Canada with the airport improvement funds, they do not support leasing. They only support outright purchase, so it's working on capital budgets and annual budgets. And this determines that the majority, but there are a number of airports that are not just looking, but actually are leasing certain machines or certain product that are running on their operating budgets versus their capital budgets. And leasing is becoming more and more interesting for even smaller airports because they are part of municipalities in lots of cases. And municipalities do have operating budgets. And for them to invest all the capital in one crunch could actually give them the opportunity to replace some major component, whether it was a pump station or something else that the city needed. So it stretches their budget out, but it makes it so that they also don't have a redundancy in their fleet, that the fleet is being replaced on a regular basis. Sometimes the leasing can be done, for example, on a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year lease. It could be leased down to $1. It could be leased down to $100, which most companies will do. But if they are part of a government agency, like a city or a non-for-profit agency, as a government agency, they have much better interest rates, for example, than you would in the commercial market. They get preferential rates. So it's becoming more interesting. We're seeing more requests for lease proposals just to give the powers that be or the upper management an option in their overall management of budgets. And with the crunch, with the lack of revenues or the revenues being down in a year like this year, and let's not fool ourselves, it's probably going to be for a few more years that we're going to see revenues down. Certain pieces of equipment are going to have to be replaced regardless. Sometimes a lease will be the option that'll actually permit them to make it through to the next crunch or their next shot at getting some FAA money or some AI airport improvement funds. But the majority is purchase.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can imagine for some airports, just the thought of putting a huge chunk of money, especially if they hadn't anticipated, if they had a piece of equipment that failed and they didn't have the chunk of money set aside to buy new equipment, I would imagine it's nice to have those options.
Well, fleet management, and this is where a fleet manager comes into mind, is also dispersing of redundant or obsolete pieces of equipment. If I have a 20-year or 30-year-old piece of equipment in the fleet, if I have a major component failure, for example, an engine, transmission, or axles or things of the like, I would actually be forced to maintain that piece of equipment because it's in my fleet. If I have a failure of a major component, I actually could be forced to invest more into that piece of equipment to keep it in the fleet than actually what it's worth. So the market value, the true market value of the machine, I might have to put an engine that's going to cost $50,000, but the actual market value of my machine, even if I put a new engine, is only $30,000. And sometimes it gets to the point, it's the price of steel. What's the price of steel? What can we get for it at auction? So we have to manage our fleets intelligently and make sure that we move our equipment around. Our primary piece of equipment, for example, in snow removal that's working this year and next year and the year after, could be my secondary piece, but the other piece that's gone has got to be dispersed. It's got to disappear because those costs, they go up, and then the maintenance costs become out of the operational budget. And again, that allows for situations, like we're going to see in the next few years. But even municipalities are doing the same.
What happens to a piece of equipment after you put it out to pasture?
A lot of them are repurposed for contractors, for example. Airport pieces of equipment, a lot of them will go to auction. A lot of them will be resold to contractors that might be doing oil field service. They might be doing city street contracts or things of the like. The machines get repurposed. Sometimes that's actually how our company got into this business. In the 1970s, our company actually started by doing repurposing of airport snowblowers for airports, but also for municipal and contractors. We would take a 20-year-old or plus airport runway snowblower. We would install a new cab, which optimizes visibility. We would install new engines or reman or relife the machine. We would change the gear ratios, for example, because they're not doing high speed in there. And it would give that machine another 5 years or 10 years of life. But today, to do that type of job, the cost to relife a piece of equipment is 40, 50, 60% of a new piece of equipment. So it's really not justifiable today. So a lot of them end up going to scrap at this point in time.
Okay.
Many.
If they're made of steel, steel can be recycled then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you got, 40,000 pound piece of equipment. There is some value there. The price of steel is $1 a pound. Well, you know what? It's worth a few $1,000s.
Yes, yes, indeed. It's been an unusual year, obviously, David, with the pandemic. What do you think the winter is going to look like just in general this year for airports?
I'm a big fan of NOAA. I spent a lot of time. I have actually some friends that work for NOAA for many years, and they have a lot of information, but they don't hesitate to look at the European models, for example, like the hurricane season and the cyclones we're seeing in the south right now. They're predicting a big winter. And here in Canada, we are looking at the same. The winter of your childhood with the big snow drifts and all of that type of thing. But I would say this year, most airports are preparing for that type of year, just because the weather cycle, these extremes are what we refer to as global warming. It does not necessarily mean it's going to be so much hotter in the wintertime. It just means that we are going to see more extremes of weather. The UK, for example, has seen more snow in the past 5 years than the previous 100 years. There are places in Europe and Asia that have seen snow that they have never seen. And we will see weather patterns change. I understand all that, but it's the extremes of weather. We're into freeze-thaw cycles now. I don't know if you remember when you were a child, if you lived in a Nordic humid climate area, you had winter from December and you had it until the spring. Well, today you have 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 freeze-thaw cycles over the year. All of a sudden it's pouring rain in January and it's 40, 50 degrees. Then it's 10 below the following week. This is very difficult on our surfaces, our road surfaces. It's difficult on our equipment. This is just the type of winter and type of weather we have to expect. So that means more freezing rain and just better prepare.
All good advice.
Yes.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us today on Show and Tell. Appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. And I wish everybody a safe and wonderful autumn. Enjoy it. It's going to come. Winter's going to come no matter what. But everybody stay safe, please.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome. Have a great day.